You sheltered me from harm, kept me warm, kept me warm. You gave my life to me, set me free, set me free. The finest years I ever knew were all the years I had with you. And I would give anything I own, give up my life, my heart, my home. I would give everything I own just to have you back again.
Please be seated. Welcome to this celebration of life for our dear Reverend Dr. Paul Skok. I am Reverend Chris. Mahatma Gandhi said, "My life is my message." Paul's life inspires us to consider the magnificence of being exactly who we are, where we are, doing exactly what we are doing, and striving for whatever our heart is reaching for. In Paul's life, we recognize that longing and desire, that innate hunger to explore and expand, that propulsive instinct inside of all of us. As we celebrate Paul's life today, we ask, what is Paul's legacy? May we never forget his example. May we always see a vision of something greater. May we continue to celebrate and honor all life. And may we follow his lead in teaching us to lead an elevated life, a life well lived. His legacy is kindness, compassion, positive living, and loving, and so much more. And now if you'll join me in prayer. In recognition that Spirit, God, the Most High, the power of the universe, has created a universe of oneness and unity. Our recognition is that we are all part, expressions of this Spirit, nature, this God, this Spirit. Each of us is called to play a distinct role on this earth, to play that role, to create, to love, and to enjoy. As we are one with this Spirit, this force, this power, this God, I recognize that the qualities of Paul are the qualities of Spirit: love, compassion, support of others, and the ability to uplift others. And I recognize that they are part of all of us. As Spirit is immortal, Paul is immortal. We are immortal. The life we live here on earth is but a passing phase, an experience. Spirit is our life, our home, our very beingness. Paul, his soul, his beingness, are part of God and totally Spirit in essence. I recognize this truth for us, for we are Spirit also, and will return to Spirit. It is true that we shall experience Paul again in his spiritual form, perhaps here on earth, most certainly when we transition to that greater experience. Our grief, our mourning, our experience of missing Paul is another expression of Spirit, Spirit expressing itself. And Spirit continues to support us, to be our very being in the midst of any feelings of grief or anger or release. In gratitude for this recognition of oneness, we move forward in our earthly existence. Paul's life was a gift for us to experience, a gift for us to learn from. and we have a grateful heart for all that we have experienced and learned. Knowing the comfort of God, the comfort of Spirit, we release this word into the great spiritual intelligence, and so it is.
So this experience that we call death is a natural part of life. What is often called death, we in this spiritual tradition call a transition. A death seems to imply an end only. Transition lets us know that it's both an end and a beginning. So I'm Reverend Kay Johnson. I'm also a minister here at Mile High Church. And I'd just like to share with you that the explanation of this mystery, because no matter what we call it, it's a mystery. And I heard Dr. Fred Vogt, who is one of the ministers, was really the minister that built this church in the early years, and for whom this building is named. I heard him explain it this way, and I thought I would share this with you today. For a moment, think about your birth. What are the chances that any one of us was ever born? There's a little one-cell egg, and then these millions of sperm, and just the perfect one, and they join, and then they start to multiply and separate and become little. Each cell knows exactly what it's supposed to become, because it is guided by divine intelligence. This in itself is an absolute miracle. An absolute miracle, this birth. Despite the odds, we were created, and so Paul was. This incredibly complex organ grows within the mother's womb, guided by divine intelligence. So that each cell says, well, one says, I think I'll be a leg. I think I'll be part of the leg. This one says, I think I'll be part of the brain. And then one of those special cells said, I think I'll be part of the vocal cords because I think he's going to talk a lot. So this is Paul growing, comforted by the beating of his beloved mother's heart. Other sounds, lots of them from outside, music perhaps, other voices. It's warm and secure in this womb, filled with love and comfort, and all Paul's needs are met. Until one day it begins to feel tight in there, crowded, no more room really to grow. It begins to feel like it might be time to leave. But no, I like it here, it's safe. I'm used to this, I know how it works here. I cannot imagine what somewhere else might feel like or be like. I'll just stay here. But the urging of the universe is strong for change. And even Paul's body says, it's time for something else. We need to move on. And Paul feels the urging of the walls of his home pushing him onward. Sometimes a birth is easy, quick, and painless, and sometimes it is long and filled with suffering. But eventually, all are born, whether they're ready or not. And what awaits this tiny being? A loving family, friends, welcoming arms filled with love and joy, and all the wonder of the world, sounds, the colors, everything to be learned. And so our beloved Paul learns to walk and to talk and grows into a life of people loving, learning, trying so many different things, becoming an expert in so many areas of his life, entering so many fields, but also a life that contained cancer. Then the time comes when the body says it's time for something else. We need to move on. And Paul says, no, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I still have so much to do. I found my space. I found my place. As a minister, I can combine everything that I have learned and studied and practiced and done in my whole life. I am not ready to go. And so he did everything he could. And he succeeded over and over. And yet, just like the birth, This process is guided by divine intelligence, beyond our understanding, also part of the mystery. And like birth, sometimes this transition is easy, quick, and painless and unexpected. And sometimes it is long and filled with suffering. And like the baby, we resist and might say, yeah, but I understand it here. I'm not ready to go. I've got a lot of things yet to do. But the process is still guided by divine intelligence, because it has never left us. It never does. It's always with us. Always there, always guiding. And so we leave this physical body here on earth, and Paul moves into another place where, just like at birth, loving arms await him. And that is why we celebrate. Just as we celebrate a birth as a life yet to unfold, we celebrate at the end of life, a life so beautifully well lived. So Paul might advise us like this if he were here. When I'm gone, release me. Let me go. I have so many other things to think, to see and do. You mustn't tie yourself to me with tears. Be happy. We had so many years. And then when you must come this way alone, I'll greet you with a smile and say, welcome home. So I would like now to invite the Lindsay family to come up to the platform. They are going to be sharing with each of you some memories and facts about Paul. And we'll be starting with Denise.
Thank you for that. That was beautiful. My name is Denise Lindsay and my daughter Kathleen. I would like to welcome all of you for coming. And I would like to share a letter that we received from Paul's mother, Annie, that she wrote in 2001 about her son. It's a mother's perspective of a determined and loving son who didn't like to brag or gloat about his achievements, but she surely could and did. She wanted us to know about her beloved Paul and how important he was in her life. Annie wrote, I'm not very good at making speeches, but this is one time there is something and someone I would like to tell you about. As you know, I am Paul's mother. He is an only child, but he has never been pampered or spoiled. As a child, he was an average kid, happy, living in an extended family. He had many childhood friends and the usual childhood ups and downs. There was nothing in his life to expect anything but a normal future, school, jobs, marriage, children, and on to peaceful old age. Then, when he was 11 years old, disaster struck. His beloved father died with little or no warning. Needless to say, it was quite a blow to a happy child. But that little boy had hidden strengths that even he didn't know he had. He took hold of his life and all its challenges head on. Then a disturbing change came into his lifestyle, and he went from living in a cosmopolitan town surrounded by people of all ages, races, religions, creeds, to a completely different way of life on a lonely farm in Indiana. But nothing daunted Paul. He grabbed his life with determination and vision. He knew there was something he had to do with his life. So for a start, he set out by getting all the formal education he could. Purdue, Ball State, DU. He received several degrees and became a successful trial attorney. Still, he felt there was something missing. Then, folks, at long last, he found the Psi way of life, and that was what he was looking for. And so, now you have the Paul Joseph Skok of today, a man dedicated to peace, love, and growth of the Spirit. Love you, Polly boy. Hello, everybody. My name is Molly Ann Lindsay, and I wrote a poem for Paul when we first found out he got sick. And I just thought I would read it to you guys today. So let's give this a try. This poem is for you, Paul. Since we were little, you have watched us crawl, spending time at Annie's every Christmas Eve. We had so much fun, we never wanted to leave. You guys are our adopted family we would never exchange, even though the Lindsay family can be a bit strange. Our love grows stronger than the Rocky Mountain range. Something like that, it is so big, it could never be changed. Paul, you are the strongest person I've ever met. Mentors to many, I would surely bet. You have helped people realize how much potential they possess. You are the key to true success and are always the one to impress. Not to mention, you always rollerblade the best. So many good memories we will never forget. I'm looking forward to so many more we have not had yet. So have no worries and puff puff pass, because you know this love and support will always last.
Good afternoon. My name is Regis Lindsay, and this is our son, Patrick Lindsay. Thank you all for coming. Paul was a great man. He was just a game changer in the life of the Lindsay family. I can't tell you what he truly was. I'd just like to tell you a brief story about the time I first met Paul. Denise and I moved out to Colorado in 1983. We moved out to a condominium in North Boulder, where we lived on the 3rd floor, and Annie lived on the 2nd floor, middle floor. And we became fast friends and family. And of course, we got to know that Annie had a son, Paul. So Annie invited us over one time and said, I want to invite you over, meet my son, Paul. We'll have dinner. And we said, it would be great. So Denise and I came downstairs. We bought a salad. Annie had some great, her famous eggplant parmesan going. And we walk in, and Annie says to me, I'd like you to meet my son, Paul Joseph Skok. So I reached my hand out, I shook his hand, and I go, how you doing? That was a big mistake. Because the next thing that came out of his mouth was, I'm on the high side of spectacular. I'm just one step beyond fantastic. I'm catapulting my way right on past magnificent. I'm on my way to a quantum leap. I'm completely ecstatic with enthusiasm, and you know what? I'm dripping with so much passion that when people walk by me, they slip and fall on their ass. But I'm getting better and better every day in every way. Thanks for asking. How are you doing? I look at Denise and I go, I'm glad I didn't ask him what was for dinner. Paul was a great man. He truly was a game changer in my life, in our family's life, and I know everybody here. But I'm going to ask Paul for one special thing. I'm going to ask him, as he was in our life, to still remain in our life. Mentor us, come to us whenever you can, because we'll need you. You were terrific. And I'm going to ask you another thing. When I come over on the other side, as all of us do, I'm going to ask you one question. How you doing? Thank you.
So now I'd like to invite Michelle up to the platform.
I need to get comfortable. I wasn't drinking, I didn't do any medication ahead of time. This isn't on what I want to say, but I want to ask Paul out there, how are we doing so far, Paul? Are you happy? I told Joellen, we all know he's here, And I wonder how many other people who have transitioned over he invited to be here today. So I feel like there's blessings on both sides.
It's a really special day. And each one of us is here because in one way or another, Paul Joseph Skok, or Paul J as we lovingly call him, touched our lives. Perhaps it was at work, or as a friend, or within your own family, or in a personal relationship. But Paul was not, as they say, a jack of all trades and a master of none. But rather he was a master of many accomplishments, both personal and professional. He was fully committed to making the world a better place through embracing his roles, whether it was as a friend, a relative, a student, an attorney, a personal growth facilitator. Did I mention a student? A realtor, a minister, and a loving partner, to name a few. Oh, and I almost forgot, the overachiever in him was also a dive master and a Reiki master, and I'm sure some of you could add some other to that list. But Paul did everything 100%. He was fully committed to other people's spiritual growth. He'd wholeheartedly intervene when anyone was dealing with a personal challenge, and that was even after his diagnosis. And he loved making a difference in the world that he thoroughly enjoyed. And when I say he did everything 100%, I mean everything. Joellen reminded me recently of when we go to Crown Hill Park to walk at a place that we called the lake. And Joellen and I would be fast walking around the large outer loop, and then we'd take the inner loop, and Paul would go off on his own with his headphones on. I'm so sorry what I'm going to say, Paul. So Joelle and I would be partway around, and before we could even see him, we'd hear him singing to the music, and he'd be jiving, like this is at Crown Hill Park with everybody else walking, and he'd be dancing, and Joelle and I would be like, oh, let's go this way. Yeah. Sorry, Paul. But he did everything 100%. I remember times at the house, social times, we'd be laughing and having fun, but Paul didn't just laugh, and some of you have seen him. He'd be on the floor rolling around with tears coming down his cheeks. He lived every moment as he loved life. So when our father passed in 2013, Paul stayed up late that night and composed a lengthy email that contained his condolences as well as a few of his favorite poems. And part of what he wrote to the family follows. Death has always been very difficult for me, so I'm doing one of the things that I do best, expressing myself with words. Here are some poems that I searched for, found, and wanted to share. They touched my heart and soul, and this is my way of loving, grieving, and expressing. So in honor of Paul J., or as I lovingly call him, Bill, for brother-in-law, I'd like to share some snippets from two of his favorite poems. First, Gibran, his absolutely favorite poet. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. And in that vein, I'd like to ask you in just a moment to close your eyes and to think back to a time when you enjoyed yourself with Paul. So if you would do that right now, just for a few seconds, close your eyes, think about what you were doing, where were you, what were you talking about? And you can go ahead and open them. It was nice to see smiles on some of your faces, because that's how Paul would want to be remembered. While his life as we think about it in the physical sense is gone, he will always continue to live in our memories. When thoughts of sadness come in, switch them to memories of how you enjoyed Paul and how he made a difference in your life. He would want that. And you may be thinking, now how does Michelle know that he would want that? Well, do you know why I know that? No. Thank you.
because the very words I just verbalized to you were not my own words. They were almost the exact same words that Paul wrote a few years ago as part of a eulogy for a very close friend. So I know he'd want you to remember him that way. Now, before closing with another favorite poem of his, I'd like to acknowledge my sister Joellen. Sorry. Or as we call her, J.E. or JoJo. And I want to acknowledge her for her unconditional love towards Paul, especially over the past 2 years, regardless of the situation. I love you. We all love you. And Paul would want me to say that, although I know Joellen says it's about Paul. So I took the liberty of changing the words in the following poem, which is a favorite of Paul's, but I wanted to change the words to suit this celebration. So, 100 years from now, it will not matter what kind of car we drove, what kind of house we lived in, how much money was in our bank account, nor what our clothes looked like. But the world 100 years from now may just be a better place because Paul Joseph Skok was in our lives. Thank you.
And now Mark is going to share, if he would come up to the platform.
First time Paul saw me in this jacket, he says, "You got to wear that to my funeral." First time that Paul introduced himself, he said, "My name's Paul Joseph Skok." I'm like, really? Why you use all those names? I made some sly comment to him, and he said, "Dude, that was my father's name, my namesake." And he went on and on, and I thought, oh, gosh. Then I had the opportunity to play a little game in Sci Seminars called PLD. And so today what I'd like to really share with you is, who was Paul Joseph Skok, the man? So when I first met him, my impression was he was arrogant, loud, controlling, hair never out of place, very, very woo-woo spiritually. I mean, the feathers and the artwork and everything was just way out there. And for a boy from Tennessee, I got to tell you, it was way too much. So we had the opportunity for an exercise that they said, "I want you to choose somebody that you do this exercise with." And he's like, "Dude, let's do it." I hated he called me dude. I'm looking around going, who else could I do this with? He's so insistent, controlling. It's like, oh, there we were. Thinking, okay, I can get through this exercise. Then they tell us, introduce yourself to your buddy for the next 90 days. If I could just make it through today with him, it'll be a miracle, much less 90 days. I was ready to quit. So I thought, well, I better put forth some effort, to really get to know him. And I was traveling quite a bit at the time, and I'd flown back in, and Paul says, "Why don't I pick you up at the airport? You stay at the house, and we'll have opportunity to get to know each other." I thought, oh, okay, that's good. So he picks me up at the airport, driving over to his house, and I'm like, man, I'm hungry. We passed right by McDonald's. I'm going, pull in there. He says, dude, I got better stuff at home to eat than that crap. I'm thinking, I kind of like McDonald's. I mean, the living room is spotless. It's just so neat. And the dining room was very neat. And the kitchen was neat. And he says, here, I'll give you a tour of the rest of the place. Walk into one of the bedrooms, and you can't even get in there. There's boxes piled up all over the place and on the bed. And he says, this is where you'll be sleeping. He says, you just need to move some of that around so you can get to the bed. The other supposedly bedroom was his office, and it was about the same way. Stuff piled all over the place. You could hardly even get through it. I thought, God, who is this guy? And then he takes me by the third bedroom. There's nothing in it except a mat on the floor, some candles, feathers on the wall. And I'm thinking, oh my God. He says, this is my meditation room. If you want to go in and use it, you can. I'm like, yeah, right. I'm ready to leave now. So anyway, we go downstairs, and he had a water bed and a pool table. I thought, okay, at least he's human. He says, I got to run next door, do a couple of things for the neighbors. He says, just make yourself at home. Go in the kitchen, get whatever you want to eat. So I go in, I open up the cabinets. I don't see anything in there I recognize. Open the refrigerator door. I don't see anything in there that even resembles food. And I look on the shelf, and here's what I thought was cheese. So I thought, okay, so I get that. It was like eating plastic. I took a couple of bites and threw that down, and he came back in, and he says, dude, you get something? I'm like, there's no food here. Well, that's what I found out, he didn't eat meat. And so I did my best to attempt to convert him over the years. And that didn't work. I actually put some meat in some soup one time, and I said, how you like this? And he's like, this is pretty good. About 4 hours later, he's throwing up all over the place. That wasn't a good thing to do to him. But then I thought, hey, it's pretty good having a buddy that's an attorney. I remember one time there was a festival over at Cherry Creek, and I was going to shop at the Whole Foods. Pulled up and parked, and there's a sign right there. If you're not shopping at Whole Foods, you cannot park here. And they even had a little additional sign that says, if you're going over to the Art in the Park or whatever it was called, you can't park here either. I'm like, it's okay. We'll park here anyway. So after we toured around the Art, came in, went to the grocery store, bought our groceries, came out, and here on my car is one of those boots with a ticket in the window. Oh, I tell you, I lost it. I was just like, you got to be kidding me. So I called the number, and the person comes over, and I'm telling them, I was shopping at Whole Foods. And they said very politely, do you have your receipt? I'm like, yeah, I got it. So I opened up the trunk, showed him all the bags of groceries and the receipt, and he said, you were in there for 4.5 hours? Well, I was shopping. Well, I'm sorry. You were in there too long. And the only way you're going to get that boot off is if you pay $50. And I'm like, oh, no. I'm calling my buddy, the attorney. He's going to fix this. So I dialed Paul up, and I get his voicemail, and I'm ranting and raving, and I said, give me a call back. Well, he doesn't call back right away, so we have to go home, and my wife, she doesn't say a word. She's like, boy, you were over the edge. So at that point, about the time we get home, get the groceries unloaded, Paul calls. So I tell him the whole story and everything, and he says, so you went to the art festival, you were parked there longer, there was a sign that was there. And I'm like, yeah. He says, dude, get over it. I'm thinking, well, what kind of buddy are you? But that's the way he was. He was real. Never had to wonder where you stood with Paul. You always knew. And he was a mirror for anybody that would allow him to participate in your life. A lot of times he'd say, do you want to do some work? And the best thing you could say was no. I'm telling you, you were in for it. It was always great advice, and he would do anything in the world to help you. Man, he was a great mirror. He loved life. We would go snow skiing, and oh my gosh, I tell you, we go up there and take off, and Paul didn't know the meaning of slow. And he didn't know the meaning of passing somebody safely. You could take off, and we'd always take off ahead of him because that's the way he wanted it to be so he could come by you. So you're going, and I would ski as fast as I could, just knowing, here he comes, he's going to come, he's going to come. And it wouldn't be like, he'd be far away from you when he'd come by, and you could hear him like 10, 20 yards behind you. Woo-hoo! And right by you. Well, the last time that we went skiing, I'm like, okay, this is it. He is not beating me to the bottom of the hill. No way. So we're going down, and he hadn't passed me, and I'm just like, oh, this is great. Now my legs are just like rubber. So I pull up to a quick stop, and wham! Paul runs right over me. We've got skis and boots and poles, and we're both spread out all over the hillside. He gets up, and he's like, "Ow! You okay?" I'm going, "What'd you do?" "I passed you." But that's the way he was. And like I said, he was real. And he didn't want to give up on life. Matter of fact, when Joe Ellen called me and said, if you want to say your goodbyes to Paul, you need to get down here. And so we went by, and Paul was always caring for other people. Like say, "How you doing?" And when I didn't hear that statement, I knew life wasn't that grand, because he always said it. And I would ag it on Joe Ellen. It's like, "Really, Mark? I mean, I hear this all the time." I'm going, "Yeah, but I love to watch people's faces whenever he says that." And then he'd always end it with, "How are you?" And people would look at him like, "Oh my God." Really? But when Joe Ellen called, I went to the house, and he wanted to get up. I said, No, sit down. He says, "How you doing?" And I said, "Well, I want to talk about how you're doing." And he kind of avoided it, and Tina was there with me, and so she went up to be with Joe Ellen a little bit, and I knew from talking with Joe Ellen that he hadn't signed the DNR, and he was not ready to go. He was going to do anything, and he was doing anything in his power to stay here, because that was Paul. He wanted to make a difference in other people's lives. Matter of fact, I talked to him a couple of months before, and he said the doctors had said, you got 3 months and that's about it. And he says, "Well, they don't know what they're talking about." And I said, "Well, what is it that's bothering you about dying?" And he says, "Well, it's not much." And matter of fact, he says, "I know how you are. You grew up in the South and all, and you think that Jesus is a big part of, the end of the world and salvation." And he says, "Just want you to know, I've accepted Jesus." I'm like, woo, what else have you? He does everything. He had shamans and you name it, it was there. And I was like, okay. I said, "What is it really, though, that's bothering you?" And he says, "I can't leave Joe Ellen. Who's going to care for her?" That's the way he was. Who's going to take care of her? And I said, "She'll be fine, don't worry about her." I said, "Let's talk about you." So Tina had left the room, and he looked right at me, because we always had real conversations. I never lied to him, and he never lied to me. He looked at me and he said, "Am I dying?" I said, "Yeah, you are." He just sat there a minute, taking it in. I said, so I want you to take what they're going to give you for the pain. I don't want you suffering, whatever your time frame is. So we had a conversation, a heart-to-heart conversation about, what was going to take place, what he was going to do. And he said, in case you don't know, I'm a funeral director on a mortuary up in Grand County. And I said, you want me to take care of you when the time comes, and what do you want done? And he said, yeah, we want to be cremated, and here he is, an eagle, soaring. And I know he's soaring, because eagles soar above everything and anything. They can handle it all, and Paul could handle it all. So we had the real conversation, and he says, dude, are you done? Because this is depressing. I said, we're good. So we laughed, we talked about things that we'd done and some of the moments that we had. And I hope you'll remember those moments you had with him, because he was special. No one and no thing can replace him. Who was Paul Joseph Skok? It wasn't the titles, because there are a lot of titles with his name. It wasn't his accomplishments. It wasn't the difference that maybe he made in your life or in somebody's life that you know. Paul Joseph Skok, as a man, was the most loving, caring, worldwide spiritual leader. My buddy.
So I just have a couple of announcements before our last speaker. I'd just like to remind you that the reception is following this time right out in the lobby, and that if others of you would like to share memories and stories, there will be opportunities to do that at that time. Also, if you would care to make a donation in Paul's memory, those can be made two places: the Denver Dumb Friends League and to Outreach International, which was something that he loved for sure. So finally coming to the platform now is Paul's wife, Joellen.
This is where Paul loved to be. This was his spot. He lived in this spot. He loved this spot. It's not my spot. Trust me, not even close. So thank you. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming here to the celebration of Paul Joseph's life. And what a life it was. And I'd like to do a few acknowledgments ahead of time. I need my glasses because I can't see. Wade Krause is here, and he's going to be performing live music in the lobby when we're done. So Wade and Pam are here, and I'd like to thank them very much for coming, for Reverend Kay and Reverend Chris for their contributions at the beginning. And you don't see a lot of Cheryl with Mount High Church, but she is the one that actually orchestrated and put this together, and she has been a dear to work with. I would also like to thank the ushers, Richard Banta, Darren Couch, Mike Ringel, Sylvia Costello, and Gail Schrog. And more importantly, well, not more importantly because they are important, but Dan Gibbons for leading the charge and putting the ushers together, and everything that he's done on Facebook, getting Paul's name out there and the service out there. And the practitioners for cocooning us in love and coming here to celebrate Paul, thank you. And all of you for coming today. And those of you that can't make it and couldn't make it, I know they're here in spirit, and I know Paul's here in spirit also. Other family members I just want to introduce because you may not know who they are and they have not spoken, but my brother, Rick Uffner, is here on the video, and he came in from Western Pennsylvania. My younger sister, Julie, is right there. If you stand up, please, Julie, just so people can see you. She came in from Washington, D.C. Paul's first cousin, Stephanie, came in from New York. And then Kimberly and Ruthie came in from Northern Virginia. They're my first cousin. They met Paul last July. So, you may or may not have noticed there's a theme here. We're all wearing blue. We're wearing blue in memory of Paul. Paul's favorite color was blue. Blue represented love to him. I know, I always thought it was red, but in Paul's world it was blue. And I tried to tell him a couple of times, honey, I think it's red. He goes, no, it's blue. Like, if you ever had a conversation with Paul when he was dead set on something, you knew, you go, okay, whatever. Paul always saw things a little differently, and that's what made him so unique. It made us, and what he saw in people was so different. He saw people bigger than you can imagine. He wanted people to be bigger than they were. I am so grateful for Paul Joseph Skok because I am a bigger, better person because of him. If you notice the photographs behind me right now, these are all photographs that were taken after he was diagnosed with cancer. And somebody could look and say, they're photographs when he was, quote unquote, sick. To me, they're photographs of the man that I loved in his essence. And in those photographs, I think his heart, his essence, showed through more than ever before. He became a better man, if that was possible, during his journey. But more importantly, in these photographs, you can see a man that loved life. He's joyous, he's happy, he never let the cancer get him down. He wanted to have fun, he wanted to live life that way. He was on the high side of spectacular. And he lived it, and it will be in those photos. And that's why those photos are behind while I'm talking now, because I want you to see Paul Joseph Skok, the most beautiful man in the world, the way I saw him the last 2 years, and his essence coming through. And I just think there's nothing prettier. So, he started his journey the way he ended it, with joy, love, and happiness. Let me tell you a little story about Paul Joseph. He loved music and he loved dancing. So to lift his spirits one day, when he was in the hospital, my sister Shelley and I were there, and he was in an isolation room. And he was kind of down, he was in a lot of pain. They had him hooked up with IVs. Nobody had given him the final diagnosis yet. So to lift his spirits, I had just heard that day on the radio the Happy song. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna play this for Paul. So, you know, he's in the bed and he's kind of like down with everything and he's in pain and the whatever. And so I put the song on, the doors close, and it starts playing. And you can imagine Paul, I'm going to imitate him for a moment. It's like, whoa, 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 let's dance, let's dance. So he's dancing about Happy song. Keep in mind, he has IVs dripping off of the pole, and I'm dancing, but I'm grabbing his pole and dragging him along. He was sick too, so he had the barf, those little barf bags that they have in there. He's barfing in there, barfing. He's turn it louder. We all need to be dancing. And he's dancing and dancing. And the nurse comes barreling through the door, and she says, "It sounds like a frat party in here." But that's how he was. He wanted to have fun. That's all he ever wanted to do, was dance and have fun. He has the biggest heart in the world. He had a friend, oh gosh, at the end of August, I'll never forget the day. He got up, he lived on the couch, he could barely sit up, and one day he gets up, he gets dressed, he comes upstairs, and I go, "Girl, what are you doing? Where are you going?" He said, "I'm driving a friend to a doctor's appointment." And I said, "What do you mean you're driving a friend to a doctor's appointment?" I go, "You could barely get up off the couch." I go, you can't move." He said, "My friend can't drive. I can drive. I can take care of him. I'm taking the doctor's appointment." That's who he was. He drove his friend to the doctor's appointment. It turns out, for those of you to know, he was picking up his friend in Lakewood, and I thought the doctor's appointment in Lakewood, he had to drive him the whole way down to Centennial, bring him back during rush hour. He never once complained. He never once told his friend anything about his ailments and where he was. But he got his friend to the doctor, and his doctor and to the doctor's appointment. That's who he was. This celebration's about love, as Paul was all about loving and giving to others, making a difference. We started the celebration with the bread song, "Everything I Own." Not all of it was played, but the verse that I'd like to read to you reads,
Is there someone you know, you're loving them so, but taking them all for granted? You may lose them one day, someone takes them away, and they don't hear the words you long to say. I'm going to ask you if there's somebody in your life that you love, that you've taken for granted. And in Paul Joseph Skok's name, I'm going to ask you in the next week when you leave here to do a random act of kindness for that person in memory of Paul. Because that's what he would want. We're ending the song, today with the song Michael Frante's Once a Day. The chorus in that song, or part of the song, reads, "You've got your friends, you've got your money, you've got your family, you've got your honey. You think you've got 1,000,000 days. Then life comes along. It knocks you right down to the ground, and that's why I say, everybody's got to hug somebody at least once a day. Everybody's got to kiss somebody at least once a day. Everybody's going to miss somebody at least once a day. And everybody's got to love somebody every day." Let's keep Paul Joseph Skok's love alive by performing a random act of kindness to someone you don't know in the next week. So I challenge you in his name, in keeping his love alive and keeping his memory alive, that each and every one of us go out in the next week and perform a random act of kindness to somebody that we love in our life and somebody we don't love in his memory. If you want to share it, that would be great to share it on the website, the Granby County Mortuary.com website. You can share it. We'd love to read those every day, what you're doing. Paul was about loving and giving back and having fun. With that said, let's rock this place. Let's give Paul J. the party he deserves. Let's fill the room with music, love, food, and laughter. Come join us in the lobby. I love you all. Thank you all for coming. There's going to be an open mic back there, so if people want to tell stories, you can tell stories in the back between Wade's songs. We're handing out pins. We have his signature saying, the whole saying on a pin. So those will be handed out to everybody. You can take. And we can start the music. And what I ask him is that you'll grab your neighbor, grab someone you know, give them a big hug. Remember a random act of kindness. Remember Paul Joseph. Let's keep his love alive and his passion.
You might never get a second verse. This ain't rehearsal, you can't put it in reverse. So just